There is more information about each sponsor in the packet you have. In that packet at the beginning is also a bio on Tom Phillips. We believe in very short introductions. It's here at this seminar. I do want to remind you to text your questions at any time you have those. Get them in early, helps us. And with nothing else, here is Tom Phillips.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors for putting on this event. We enjoy it every year. We look forward to it, so thank you. And thank you for inviting me to tell my story and the story of our family business. I want to start by recognizing some of my guests who are very important to me who are here today. From Weekends Only, our executive team, and one of our advisory board members is here. As Dan said, my siblings are here, 2 of their spouses, and our mom is here. Mary Ann, would you please stand up and be recognized? And I'd like to introduce you to my partner in life and love, my beloved wife of 41 years, Peggy. Would you please stand? And our children, Sarah, Rachel, and Drew are here. Would you guys stand and let them see you? Thank you. Sarah and Drew work in the business, and Rachel took after her mom and is a nurse practitioner. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have a story.
It's Tuesday.
Forgot about that. But first, let me remind you what day it is. Sorry, Laura. Can you recover?
It's Tuesday. We're closed.
Forgot the commercial. How can you forget that? Ladies and gentlemen, we all have a story to tell. It's just not usually the story we share with the world. This morning, my friends, you're going to hear my real story. I'm going to tell you a story as it relates to our family business, from the first generation, G1, to the present generation, G4. And these are the topics I plan to cover. The histories of Phillips Furniture and Weekends Only, my personal story as a history and journey as a leader, and the Weekends Only growth story to a top 100 furniture company in the nation, our transition to a non-family president, Weekends Only future growth plans, and my evolving succession and exit plans. But first, we did that already, let's go on. 1939. 37-year-old Percy J. Phillips from Webster Groves, Missouri, identified an opportunity. He discovered through a friend that railroad companies like the Union Pacific and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe needed an outlet to dispose of product on cars that had sustained damage during transit. So he offered to solve their problem. He would take the entire car at pennies on the dollar and pass those savings on to his customer. The terms of payment, he would pay them when he sold it. Pretty shrewd if you ask me. He bought a vacant building on South 7th Street in downtown St. Louis to display his goods. He called it Phillips Mercantile. I don't suppose anyone here ever remembers that building. It was 3 floors of extreme value product, limited quantities, some distressed products, some perfectly good. Some of these cars had furniture and appliances on them. As you can see, it was a no-frills environment. Furniture lined up in squeaky wood floors and lit by bare light bulbs. I want you to notice the original chair wall. If you've ever been to one of our stores, maybe that's where the idea came from. And you know whatever you got there was a great deal because he passed those savings on to his customers. My personal history in the family business begins here. After Tom Phillips Sr. came home from the Korean War in 1953, he joined his dad and Billy, his brother Billy, in the family business on South 7th Street, and they would work there together for the next 11 years. 1964, I was 12 years old. Two memorable firsts in my life. October 4th, my first visit to see the St. Louis Cardinals play in Sportsman Park. I sat right up there in the second tier down the left field line. The National League pennant race had come down to the last day. The Cards won that day, and they won the pennant. It was quite thrilling. Anybody was there that day by chance? Anybody else there? Stephen? You remember who they played? Remember who they beat? No, the Mets. They beat the Mets that day, yes. My second first was my first visit to my grandfather's store on South 7th Street. I still remember the musty smell and the sound of the squeaky wood floors as I walked them. And I walked to the back of the store and looked out the window toward the east, where two legs of the gateway arch under construction rose out of the ground, tilting in toward each other. It was around this time that Percy sold the building to MoDOT, who planned to tear it down and make way for US Highway 40. But my first experience of the family business was here. And I believe that my first experience in my grandfather's store is where the seeds of Weekends Only were sown in my subconscious. 2 years later, I entered the St. Louis Archdiocesan Seminary, Prep Seminary High School, and continued on to college at Kenrick Lennon, where I received a liberal arts degree in philosophy and theology. Now, that isn't exactly the educational background that you would think launched somebody on a successful business career, but I think this training served a valuable purpose in my later years as a leader. In 1964, my dad and Billy built a store in Kirkwood on Manchester Road with the proceeds of that sale of the downtown store. By then, they had decided to focus exclusively on selling furniture and had continued the concept of buying distressed product at deep discounts. They were known as the salvage dealers for the furniture business in St. Louis. That's Billy on the left, and my dad Tom on the right, and that's the mayor of Kirkwood doing the ribbon cutting ceremony, Bill Fitzinger, if you might remember. Now, their concept was essentially the same as their father's: opportunity buys on extreme value, distressed product, no frills, low-cost showroom, friendly customer service, limited quantities, no options. You can take it home today or have it delivered. Now, in addition to the Kirkwood store, they had a store in Belleville on South Belt near Highway 158. This is where my brother Stephen and I as teenagers, learned how to assemble furniture and deliver it. The best part of the day was when Dad would take us out for lunch. That was a rare treat for us. Now, I ultimately decided that the celibate life was not for me. And so in 1973, I left the seminary in the middle of my senior year and finished my philosophy degree out at Maryville College. After just 2 weeks there, fresh out of the seminary, I met a captivating and beautiful nursing student, Peggy Schaefer, and we started to date. Just 1 year later, we were engaged. Wasn't I a lucky guy? My first job out of college was as a middle school teacher, which I loved, but didn't pay enough for me to get married. So I asked my dad in the kitchen one day if I could come into the family business. Somewhat surprised, he immediately said yes. No interview, no salary negotiations. He just told me to show up for work at the Gravois store and somebody would let me in. I learned later that my salary was to be the same as my brother Stephen's, who started there the year before, $500 a week. So in 1975, two significant life events happened. I started work in the family business, and I married my sweetheart, Peggy Schaefer. Now, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, 5 boys and a girl. The 4 oldest of us, myself, Steve, Matt, David, entered the business in the mid-70s. The youngest 2, Maria and John, joined the business in the mid-80s. And John subsequently left the family business to be a furniture manufacturing rep, which he still is, and Weekends Only happens to be one of his best customers. Our sister Maria is currently working for Weekends Only as a showroom merchandiser, making our West County store a beautiful showroom to behold. As far as Dad was concerned, if you were family, you had a job. And you knew you were never going to get fired, and you were never going to have any kind of performance review of any kind either. For Dad, the more family, the better. And his dream was that each of us would have our own store to run. With more families to feed, Dad and Uncle Bill made some growth moves. The Kirkwood store didn't have a great street presence, as you can see. And when the barrel-roofed S&H Green Stamp store next door became available, they bought it and then built a connecting building, doubling the size of the store, and completely redesigned the storefront. They also bought a former Bettendorf Wrap food store on Gravois in Afton, where I began my career in the business. My uncle soon retired thereafter and sold his shares, citing the fact that there were too many of Tom's sons running around and he wanted to get out of the way. This made for an orderly transition to G3. There were some important lessons that we learned from G2. My dad and his brother Billy were 50-50 partners. I think they were very important role models for us as to how siblings treat each other in a family business. They were always respectful with each other, even in arguments. More importantly, we saw that they were friends, and they enjoyed activities outside of work, like hunting, fishing, and golf, that made their relationship even stronger. They had fun together. Their relationship communicated to us, I think, an unspoken lesson that this is how family business is supposed to look. I know I just took their relationship for granted until I observed another family business firsthand that wasn't like this at all. Peggy's father was also part of a family business. He was the oldest of 4 sons who were in the business, but they weren't equal shareholders. Peggy's dad had 51% because that's the way her grandfather set it up. And the rest of the shares were split among the others. And from what I understand, that was the source of the disharmony. Now, I don't altogether know how they got to this place, but there was a wedge between the 2 oldest. And the tension in their relationship made family gatherings very uncomfortable. This estrangement went on for years, even though they worked together in the business. And after they retired from the business, they had nothing to do with each other. And the fracture endured into their older ages until Peggy's dad was dying. In his final weeks, suffering terrible regret, he asked Peggy to help him write a letter to his brother, trying to find a way to peace between them. It went like this: "Brother, I'm dying. I don't have much longer to live. And I'd like the 2 of us to be at peace with each other. So I'm writing to say I'm sorry for the role I played in what's happened between us. And I hope you can forgive me as I have forgiven you for the role you played. I want peace between us. I know this is how Mom and Dad would have wanted it. He signed it, mailed it, and waited for a reply. Finally, 2 weeks before he died, a letter arrived. It said simply, "Go in peace." But that was enough for him. He was at peace, and now he could go. Witnessing that experience for me was enough for me to resolve that that was not the kind of regret that I wanted for myself when I was dying. That was a strong lesson for me, and I called up that threshold experience whenever things became difficult between me and my brothers. So we learned valuable lessons from G2. We followed their example in getting together to go hunting and fishing together. This gave us something to do outside of work that kept us connected. We always had plenty of good-natured fun and lots of laughs. These were the best of times between us. Some things were not so easy. Dad loved us all equally, so he struggled with things like how to pay us. He wanted to pay us equally without regard to education or the role one served in the business. For example, when he appointed me the Gravois store manager, I really had to argue with him that I should be paid more than some of my siblings who didn't have that added responsibility. It was hard for him to separate family from business. Family, business. The two words seem at opposites. They almost collide with each other. How do you conduct the sometimes very tough aspects of running a business and include what it means to be family? Like most families, my siblings and I grew up around the same kitchen table, each of us equally entitled to food, equally entitled to shelter, clothing, and education, and most of all, equally entitled to our mom and dad's love and support. So in family settings, there's this natural sense of entitlement. And when we found ourselves in a different setting with our dad, at a work setting, doing different kinds of, quote, household chores, those feelings of entitlement don't just go away. They remain in play until they are unlearned and disarmed. And it took a lot of work and a lot of letting go for us siblings to unlearn a sense of entitlement, disarm them, and run a professional business. To my siblings' credit, we eventually got there, but we couldn't have done it without the help of outside advisors and consultants. The 80s were good growth years for Phillips Furniture. Wanting to dispel the perception in the market of salvage dealers, we built in-store gallery programs with top brand name manufacturers like Broyhill, Thomasville, Serta, Lazy Boy. We felt this gave us credibility. We were growing, and we began to get noticed in the industry as the new up-and-comers. So much so that in 1986, Dad convinced Lazy Boy to grant the Phillips family the exclusive rights, licensee rights, to open Lazy Boy furniture galleries in the St. Louis market. Dad named Stephen to run this new business. And over the next few years, Steve would grow the business, that Lazy Boy operation, to a successful 5-store presence in the St. Louis metro. So in 1987, we opened the first 2 of these Lazy Boy stores, and at the same time, we also opened a 3rd Phillips Furniture store in the fast-growing St. Charles market, in what would prove to be a disastrous move for the business. We had grown too fast, and Phillips Furniture was simply not the right concept for that market. We were too early and in a relatively poor location at the corner of Zumbel and 94. And 2 years later, to make things worse, the recession hit. And we were in serious trouble. We were out of cash, behind in our vendor payments, struggling just to get product in to fill customer orders, leverage to the max. We weren't just bleeding, we were hemorrhaging. We closed that St. Charles store after having lost over $1 million and still on the hook for a long-term lease. This was the worst of times for the family. One day, Dad called a family meeting at my home around the kitchen table. He stunned us with the brutal facts. If things didn't start improving in 1 month, he said, we would have to close the business. So he put together a cost-cutting plan, including layoffs and salary cuts for ourselves and employees. And then we set up meetings with our lenders to try and convince them to stick with us. One meeting I'll never forget. I went with my dad to meet with the lender who had our line of credit that funded our inventory. We had fallen behind in our payments, and I thought they'd pull the line, call the loan, and throw us into bankruptcy. Now, Dad had spoken with this lender on numerous occasions in the previous months working through these past due bills, so they knew him. They knew him well. So we laid out our cost-cutting plans, our sales forecasts, our payment plans, and the guy just kept staring at the numbers with a very concerned look on his face as he reviewed our plan. We waited in silence, a very long silence. I thought to myself, oh my God, here it comes. This is not going to work. This is the end of our business. But then Dad cleared his voice and, looking the guy right in the eye, said, look, it may take me some time, but I'm going to pay you what I owe you. You have my word. And the guy rose slowly out of his chair, and I thought he was going to leave. But he reached out for my dad's hand, and he said, that's all I wanted to hear you say. We will stand by you. That day, my esteem for my father soared, and I learned an invaluable lesson. Communicate with your lenders often. Keep them informed. Yes, show them your plans and your forecasts, but also let them know you, who you are, what you stand for, so they get a sense of your character. And when tough times come, and they will, you'll have real credit where it matters the most, in your word. We were slowly working our way out of that mess, but Dad had had enough. Just a few months later, he announced his retirement, and he appointed me at age 40 president of Phillips Furniture. And then he sold his shares to us four boys in the business, each of us 25% owners. And on December 31st, 1992, at age 62, Dad left the building, and he did not come back. He let go of it completely, and it was ours now. And we got to work. While Steve was having good success with the Lazy Boy stores, Phillips Furniture Company was still in a very weakened state. For 3 years, I tried various tactics to breathe new life into the company. Like, I tried this new concept called home theater, but with just incremental gains. But we had an even bigger problem at the Gravois store. Since '92, it had had successive years of declining sales, and I did not have any answers to turn it around. So for the first time, I reached out and sought the help of an outside company and hired a consultant whom I had met at the furniture market in North Carolina, Ralph Rosine with Target Systems. I can still remember Ralph's first visit to the Gravois store. After touring the store, he said, yeah, this store looks really tired. He then said, I've heard of a concept on the East Coast that's doing pretty well that might work here, but I'm not sure you have enough parking for all the customers it will attract. Yeah, I laughed too. At that point, I almost fired him because I thought it was so ridiculous. We wouldn't have enough parking. He actually turned out to be correct. Here's how Weekends Only came into being. Ralph told us of a concept called the dump in Virginia Beach, Virginia. He said they had really low prices and that they were only open Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And when I heard the name, the dump, something hit me. I recalled that the French word gravois means debris or dump. Gravois was the name the early St. Louis French settlers had given to the road to the dump. And I thought, this might be an omen. Then Ralph asked us some key questions. Good consultants always ask you the right questions. Like, what were you doing when you were the most successful? As we reflected on this, we discovered that when we had sales, customers responded. When customers realized they were saving money, they bought. People like getting deals. We also discovered that with our gallery programs, our assortments had slowly evolved to higher price points. And although our product was stylish, it was only appealing to a small percentage of the market. These brand names just weren't a good value. We discovered we had lost our value proposition with our customers. It was also at this time that we conducted a traffic study. We actually paid high school students to count the number of customers coming in our doors during our hours of operation. What we discovered was 70% of our traffic came in on the weekends. And we asked ourselves, what if we could always offer the best deal on name brand products? What if our main focus was saving our customers money on furniture and mattresses? What would have to be true to have a concept like that? We decided to adopt the abbreviated days of operation schedule to lower our costs and deliver on the promise of saving our customers money. And we decided to leverage our relationships with the brand names and offer to buy their closeouts, canceled orders, and overstocks at discounted prices. One afternoon in 1996, we sat down with Ralph and for the first time wrote out a business plan that broke all the rules that we were used to in our conventional furniture business, starting with only being open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We were unknowingly creating an upscale version of our grandfather's concept. No frills warehouse display, extreme value product, ever-changing assortment, limited quantities, no options, what you see is what you get, an immediate take with, or you can have it delivered. So we had the model and our mission to save our customers money. Now, all we needed was the name. Just a few days later, my brother David bursts into my office and says, Tommy, I have the name. Great, Dave, lay it on me. Weekends Only. I said, David, that's brilliant. That's the name. It was as simple as that. I called our agency to develop a brand logo and a marketing plan. It's an image of our first logo. So with our plan and our brand name, we set about closing the Gravois store as a Phillips Furniture in December of '96 and converted it into a plain vanilla box showroom. And in March of '97, 20 years ago, we opened the first Weekends Only furniture outlet store as a subsidiary of Phillips Furniture. And David Phillips was the first store manager. David's foundational and enduring contribution was to prove the concept in this location. If it worked in this B location, it would be a great indicator for us to open more stores. He delivered. It was also during these years that other changes occurred in the family business, changes that were to have significant impact on our sibling relationships. When you're an owner working in a family business, you're wearing 3 hats: owner, employee, and relative. And unless you've been there, you can't imagine how difficult this is to do well. Our consultant, Ralph, was helping us sort out when to wear each of those 3 hats. We had to accept that our chief responsibilities as owners were to provide capital to fund the company and hire or appoint a president to run it. We had to accept also that ownership doesn't mean you're entitled to a particular position or title or compensation that's above market for your position. When you're at work in the operating company, you check your owner's hat at the door. This was probably the hardest one to get alignment on. I remember one night in particular, we were having a family business meeting, my brothers and I, and one of my brothers was making a case for making an operational change at Phillips Furniture, where I was still president. I didn't agree. We debated for a good while. I was still resistant. And then he raised his voice a little bit and said, "I'm an owner. You have to listen to me." And I retorted, "Brother, I hear you, but all you're really entitled to is a vote and 25% of the profits. If you don't like the way I'm running the business, you can vote me out." Well, he did not make the motion that night, and so that was the end of it. But these ownership versus employee concepts were very difficult conversations for us brothers to have with one another. We all had to get on the same page, including our spouses. And if our family business was to grow and succeed, this was crucial. Ralph helped us to make a very important paradigm shift by posing this question. You have to decide, he said, does the business exist to serve the family, or does the family exist to serve the business? Does the business exist to serve the family, or does the family exist to serve the business? Now, I'm not saying that we never make accommodations at times for family, because sometimes we do. But no accommodation should ever hurt the business. Overall, though, we wanted to run a professional family business. And we returned to this question again and again over the years to help us get our minds right. I submit that every family business needs to answer this question for themselves. By the end of the 90s, Stephen had lost confidence in the Lazy Boy concept. And when Lazy Boy required us to invest millions of dollars to update our stores to meet their new store format, we said, no, we're not going to do that. We had another concept that we would rather invest in. They thought we were nuts. Nevertheless, in 2000, we sold the Lazy Boy stores back to them, and Stephen came to work at Phillips Furniture, reporting to me. This was the beginning that led to us brothers splitting up. Stephen was used to being his own boss at Lazy Boy, and I was used to being the boss at Phillips and Weekends Only. And I wasn't willing to give up control of either. Now, if you know the two of us, you know we are both rather strong-willed individuals. And to Steve's credit, he actually did quite well in giving me authority as his supervisor at that time. But I wasn't very good at knowing how to be a worthy supervisor to him. In fact, following the advice of our consultant, Ralph, I went so far one time to tell Stephen, that I was going to write him up. You ever see how big he is? I was going to write him up for not hitting his sales goals. Now, Steve's recollection of this event is that he had given me, at the beginning of the year, he gave me his projection for the year, a healthy 11% increase in sales over the year before. And that by mid-year, he was only running at a 9% run rate, and so I took him to task. He was only at 9%. Now, it's hard for me now to believe that I would write him up for that, but I have to admit it, I clearly remember I was going to write him up. And he remembers why, so I can't dispute it. And I remember how he responded. If I wrote him up, he said, he would file it in one of my bodily parts where the sun don't shine. And he delivered it with these blazing red eyes to me, so that kind of brought me to my senses, and I did not follow through on my threat. But that experience drove a wedge of mistrust between us in a way, and in time I resolved that it would be better for me to sell my Phillips shares, and David followed suit and sold his as well. We wanted to focus exclusively on growing weekends only. So in 2001, we spun off Weekends Only from Phillips, and David and I sold almost all of our Phillips shares to Stephen and Matt. I kept a 5% stake at Phillips, but this 5% would later prove to be very crucial. But Stephen and Matt, they kept their Weekends Only shares because they saw a lot of upside in the concept. So we were still equal shareholders at Weekends Only, as well as 3 of the buildings that we owned together. The years from 97 to 2003 were years of rapid growth for Weekends Only. And in 2004, after having opened 6 stores in 6 years, we had grown sales to over $30 million. We'd also moved into a larger warehouse, and if that wasn't enough change, we also installed a completely new computer system. I had wrought too much change too fast on the company, and we were in chaos. We had grown too fast without enough cash or competent talent. We were maxed out on our line of credit, and we had major people problems. I had lost some good talent due to my blind spots as a manager and a leader. Looking back, I'd have to describe my style then as dictatorial, righteous, unwilling to listen, stubborn, perfectionistic, overly critical, micromanager. Other than that, I was pretty good. No, well, you get the picture. The company was faltering, and in 2004 we had our first profit loss, and it was substantial. I felt that I was failing, and worse, a failure. I was miserable, even depressed. This was the worst time in my life. And thank God for Peggy. Whenever the going got tough, she was there. I don't know what I would have done without her, actually. Because of her wisdom, her strength, her support, her belief in me, I found the courage to carry on. Faced with the pain of failing, I came to realize my style wasn't working. And for those of you fortunate enough to go through something like this, you probably understand that failure can be a very effective teacher. I say fortunate because that's when you learn the most. And what I learned was that the problems, most of the problems the business was experiencing, had to do with me. And if I wanted to change things for the better, I had to start with changing myself and my leadership style. And that's what I set out to do. What I also learned was how important having the right consultant is. Ralph Rosine was an excellent strategist, and we learned a ton from him. and I'll always be grateful to him for giving us the idea that led to Weekends Only. But somewhere along the way, I lost my authentic self. And had I just slowed down and really listened to my gut, to my authentic self, I don't think I would have followed Ralph's advice to write Stephen up way back then. In fact, it was over those years, Stephen would often tell me that I was giving Ralph too much authority and that I had lost myself, who he knew as a younger man. I just couldn't see it at the time. But by the end of 2004, I was ready for a change in consultants. 2004 was pivotal for another reason. At Phillips, Stephen and Matt had gained the exclusive licensee rights from Ashley Manufacturing to open Ashley Home Stores in the St. Louis market. Now, the Ashley Home Store concept had proven to be highly successful in other markets around the country, and my brothers planned to open a number of stores in town. Stephen's son, Michael, who had been working at Weekends Only, was leaving to go work for his dad. But Steve wanted my 5% shares for Michael to buy. And I said that I would sell them if both he and Matt would sell their Weekends Only shares. They agreed. This completed the split between the brothers, and now we would be true competitors in the same market. Two brothers against two brothers, fighting for market share in the St. Louis furniture retail business. The gloves were coming off, and it was welcome to the NHL. And for the next 9 years, our relationships would be tested in ways that we had not yet experienced. Now, Mom and Dad were watching all this from the sidelines. Dad did not like this at all. In fact, he tried to convince us to merge forces together to create a large holding company. But that was not to be. I think there was just too much mistrust and competition between us. And I felt we had to separate. And we became each other's fiercest competition. Maybe that's why during this time my dad would often pester me to join the Duck Club. In 2001, Dad bought farmland in Illinois for duck hunting. Dad wanted a place where he and his boys could go hunting together. The first few years, though, I didn't join. I mean, why would I want to be in a duck blind with my brothers with loaded guns in their hands? But every year, Dad would encourage me to join. Finally, after 4 years, I relented and joined. And that fall, I made my way up there for the season opener. That night, as is custom, we gathered around the outdoor fire pit. And my dad, Stephen, and I were in a conversation about the past at Phillips, and out of nowhere, Stephen blurted out, "And you were going to write me up. How could you even think about doing that?" Now, this had happened 5 years before, and apparently this had been festering in him all this time, and now it was out. I stood there in silence, surprised, taken aback. I glanced over and saw Dad watching. I took a deep breath and I said, "Stephen, I was wrong for doing that. I'm sorry, and I apologize." And with that, my dad points at me and he says, "That's why I wanted you to join the Duck Club." He knew better than we that his two oldest sons' relationship was in need of healing, and that there was a chance it could happen in that environment. And indeed, it was a healing moment for me. It was so important we had that exchange. It was also around this time that Peggy was continually urging me to get some outside help to turn things around at weekends only. And a business acquaintance, Paul McKee, recommended I go see a guy named Joe Hoffman with CMA. Now, Joe was to be, for me, the guide that I needed to regain my authentic self, to change my leadership style, and make the business better. And I explained our concept to Joe and the financial troubles that we had, and Joe gave me the best advice. He said, Tom, whenever I've seen a company with a good strategy, and you have a good strategy, I believe, and they're in trouble, it's usually, no, he said, it's always a people problem. So we focus first on people, and then Jen Nguyen joined the effort. We began with CMA doing assessment testing on each member of the executive team, including myself. The results? Thankfully, I could stay. But of my executive team, it turned out I only had one A player and two poor performers who just weren't good fits. So I ejected the poor performers, promoted the A player to Chief Operating Officer, hired back the talented merchandiser that I had lost, and we started to rebuild the company. The first thing was to get aligned around what mattered most. We did this by answering some key questions. Why do we exist as a business? What do we stand for? Where are we going? Who are we going to take with us? We had our mission, our reason for being. We were clear on that, to save our customers money. But what do we stand for? One afternoon in September 2004 at an out-of-town seminar, our newly promoted COO, Diane Dumitru, and I basically crafted what was to become a set of values that would inform how we related with our customers and each other. We dreamed out loud together of the kind of company culture we wanted to have. And we ended up with 6 values. These values endure to this day. A little while later, we adopted a lofty vision to become a top 50 home furnishings retail company in the nation. At the time, we were doing sales of about $30 million. And to be a top 50, we'd have to be doing at least 5 times that. And then we began the slow process of weaving this vision, mission, and values into the fabric of the company. So every month, for 5 years, I would go around to a different location and meet with frontline workers. We called it Coffee with the CEO. We would discuss what it meant to live out our mission and values. This took years of continual focus and repetition. And along the way, I came to believe that capturing the hearts and minds of our people was the most important thing we could do. So at these coffees and at every new employee orientation meeting, I would talk about my newfound philosophy of the need for an engaged workforce. Here's what I would tell them I wanted. I want more than your hands and your feet when you're here. I want your hearts and your minds as well. I want you to enjoy, value, and believe in what you do. I want you even to have a meaningful life. I want you to find a measure of happiness from being part of our brand and the contribution that you make here. You see, I came to realize that happiness and a meaningful life were what I most desired. And if this is what I, as a human being, longed for, happiness and a meaningful life, wouldn't everyone? And why couldn't a workplace work to provide an environment that fosters that kind of culture and human happiness? A place where people feel valued and cared about. If not here in a family business, then where else could it be possible? What I finally figured out was the importance of relationships and the power that is unleashed when teams of talented people with strong relationships come together and give themselves to a common purpose, they can accomplish whatever they imagine. And I started to listen, to deeply listen to those around me. And I realized that I did not have to be the one to have all the answers, because I didn't have them. I have 2 groups of mentees now at Weekends Only. And to prepare for my meetings with them, I think to myself, what would I want to tell my 30-something-year-old self if I could? I think I'd say, slow down and listen to the people around you. That connection is more important than being correct. That what's most important is not a great bottom line, it's great relationship. I want my mentees to reach their maximum potential, and to do that, I encourage them to focus on continually strengthening the relationships in their lives. I believe that's how people and culture are changed. A culture of engagement. To this day, it is one of our strategic planks. As our culture changed, our results changed. Here's a graph of our annual sales from 2005 to 2016. And as you can see, even during the tough years of the Great Recession, we found a way to post increases over the year before, and with no new stores. I believe getting the right people and changing our culture were the key ingredients to our success. And in 2009, we broke into the top 100 furniture companies in the nation on our journey to the top 50. Now, you might be wondering, if Weekends Only was having such good growth over this time period, what was happening with my brothers at Phillips and Ashley? Well, they too were growing with each new Ashley store they opened. Over these years, they opened a total of 7 Ashley stores in St. Louis and Columbia, Missouri, and reopened Phillips Furniture in Kirkwood that they had changed to an Ashley store for a few years. Looking back, I would say that the competition between us brothers made us better merchants. I think there was a healthy respect between us that usually carried the day. In fact, many Monday mornings, Steve and I would actually compare notes as to how our respective sales were the previous weekend. I always understated mine so he wouldn't know how bad I was beating him. Zing, zing. It's true, Michael. Competition was fierce. Competition was fierce. We'd fight over product at markets. We'd have price wars. And a couple of times we had to call each other out on some advertising that crossed the line. Conversations at family gatherings were guarded. And there were 2 quotes from the movie The Godfather that we particularly like to use with each other. It's not personal, it's strictly business. And don't ask me about my business. But I have to be honest. None of us really enjoyed competing against each other. It was unpleasant and uncomfortable. And deep down, I think we cared about each other and wanted to be connected somehow, but neither of us wanted to lose either. We fought every week for market share. And both businesses continued to grow. Fortunately, we kept up our outside activities together. In the spring, we would go on a fishing trip together, and every fall during duck season, we'd gather and hunt together. I believe these outside activities that we would do together kept our relationships intact, even as competitors. As our kids came of age, many of them would come to work in the business, mostly part-time or seasonal during their school breaks. But if they wanted to make it a career in the family business, we wouldn't allow them to come directly into the business after their schooling. We required that they work in some other business, for a long enough period of time to demonstrate progress there and be promoted, typically 3 to 5 years. Excuse me. 2 of my children work full-time in the business now, Sarah and Drew. David's daughter, Grace, and Maria's son, Eddie, work part-time or seasonally in one of our stores. Now, Sarah has been in the business over 10 years now and is a Cracker Jack senior buyer. She has no desire to run the business. Product is her passion. But she hopes to be VP someday. And Drew, with his MBA, came on board almost 5 years ago and is currently e-commerce product manager. And our e-com business is through the roof. Drew holds out the possibility of becoming president someday. To their credit, neither of them wants a position in the business that they are not suited for, qualified for, or ready for. And fortunately, we have time to discern their leadership abilities. This is just one area where our advisory board proves to be invaluable to us and help, as an example, in helping assess their readiness. We've had an outside board since 2008. Currently, there are 3 board members, Craig Schnook, Rick Meyer, and Mike Burnell. I'm pleased that Rick is here today. I strongly recommend advisory boards and outside consultants for family businesses. Now, with kids in the business, I have to wear the boss hat and the dad hat, and I have to know when to wear each one. As much as I don't like it, Sarah and Drew will always hear what I have to say through the filter of my being their dad. And there's always a built-in possibility of their getting hurt by some seemingly benign statements I may make. So it's my responsibility to understand the weight of my words that come out of my mouth. So to provide honest feedback for them, I rely on trusted non-family managers inside the business. And I give these managers full reign and authority to do so. In December 2013, Stephen, Matt, and Michael gave David and me a wonderful Christmas gift. They sold their Ashley and Phillips businesses to a Canadian company who was buying up Ashley stores around the country. And since that change, our business with Ashley Manufacturing has more than doubled. Their gift is a gift that keeps on giving. Another gift is that we're no longer in competition with each other. Stephen and I have often reflected on how grateful we are to simply be just brothers again and not competitors. That is a burden that has been lifted from both of us. And I think it's made a big difference in our relationship. 3 years ago, I promoted our CFO of 7 years, Lane Ham, to president. Lane and our very talented executive team are doing the heavy lifting now. We have a 5-year growth plan that involves opening additional new markets as well as growing e-commerce sales. Later this year, we will be opening our 2nd store in Indianapolis for a total of 7 stores. Our 5-year plan projects sales of well over $100 million, which is a personal goal of mine before I retire. Now, with Lane's proven success over the last 3 years, he's demonstrated that a non-family member can run a family business and keep the culture intact. I'd say the key to this is my relationship with Lane. We have a strong relationship built on honesty, transparency, and trust. He tells me when I'm stepping in where I shouldn't, and I listen to him and try to modulate my behavior. The hardest part for me has been to let go of control and being the decision maker. But I think I'm getting a little better. Here's a story that might demonstrate that. Every January, one of our buyers, with Jane Roberts, our VP of Merchandising, in attendance, presents their merchandise strategy to Lane and me. When Sarah presented her plans, I tried to play my CEO card by saying, I think we're missing seating in nurseries, especially rockers and gliders. You need to add these to your assortment. Millennials are having babies and they need a chair that rocks with their baby. Jane stepped in and said, we'll consider it. I said, what do you mean you'll consider it? Don't I get a say in this? I'm an owner and the CEO. And she said coyly, no, you don't. I smiled because I knew she was right. And I backed off, actually pleased that there was enough safety for her to tell me so. So I am basically a high-paid consultant in my own company. I'm just proud and happy to still be a part of it. Still, it's hard to believe it was 20 years ago that we started Weekends Only on the road to the dump. 20 years. It has been quite a journey, and the journey continues because of these talented people. We have a very bright future. I asked them to stand up. Lane, Monda, Jane, Judy, Diane, Sarah, and Drew, and be recognized. As I approach age 65 this year, it's a time of discernment for me, personally and professionally. When do I retire? What do I really want by then? Legacy or cash? Of course, I want both. Do I keep it a family business or just sell it? How do we share the success with those in the business who work so hard to grow it? What succession plan will work best for the business? How do we structure it all? See, in the early days, when we were growing Weekends Only, my vision was to grow it to $50 million and then sell it. But when we got there and I experienced the value that Weekends Only was adding to the lives of our team members, our customers, and the community, it was quite fulfilling to me. And I began to envision a legacy of leaving behind a sustainable company of great value. And when our kids came into the business, Peggy and I had the dream of keeping it a family business. But we've also learned that family business doesn't have to be run by a family member. It can be family owned and not family run. My succession and exit plans are still evolving as I consider the possibilities, again, with the help of my board and outside consultants. Wrapping up, let me brag on the family for a moment. By the end of their 9-year run, Steve, Matt, and Michael had also built their business to a top 100 furniture company in the nation with sales of over $60 million. So that by the end of 2013, when they sold, between the two companies, the third generation of the Phillips family was running not one, but two top 100 furniture companies in the nation with 13 stores and combined sales of $115 million. Now, I think that's something to be proud of. So I want to leave you this morning with this question. How do you measure success in a family business? Year after year sales growth? Operating profit or EBITDA? retained earnings, successful ownership transition to the next generation. These are all viable answers. Not for me. Not for me. For me, the way to measure success in a family business is this. After business, we are still family. After business, we are still family. Would you guys please stand up for me? My siblings. I propose that we measure our success by the love and connection between us when we are no longer in business together. The fact that you all came here today means a lot. We are still family, and I say that's the measure of our true success. I know Mom and Dad would both agree. Thank you for being here. And thank all of you for your kind attention to my story.
Thank you, Tom. That was very touching. I want to see if we have any questions from the audience that might come forward, but while we're waiting for that, I would like to ask Tom's brothers, Steve and Matt and David, is there anything you would like to add to Tom's story? We do have a microphone if there's something you would like to add. You don't have to say something. I don't mean to put you on the spot, although I just put you on the spot. But if there's something you would like to add, please come up and say something.
Thank you. Tom, you said it all.
Do we have a mic? Come on. Oh, he said it all.
Tom said it all.
Tom said it all. Okay, so you agree with everything he said? Is this the first time they've agreed with everything you've said? No? Okay. Thank God for duck hunting, right? Okay. Tom, I have a question. Your two children into the business. Tell us about your plan for bringing them into the business. How did you bring them into the business?
Well, Sarah's the oldest, so Sarah told me one fall day she wanted to go to the furniture market with me because she wanted to find a job in the furniture industry, work for a manufacturer. So I took her to the October market. How many years ago was that? 11, 12 years ago? She's gone, okay. And she got a job with Lane Furniture. She started, learning about manufacturing, furniture manufacturing. And then she got promoted and went to another company after that. And then one day she called and said, "Dad, I'm ready to come home now. Do you have a job?" I said, "Well, the only opening we have right now is as a showroom merchandiser. And it doesn't pay what you're getting paid right now." So she said, "No, I don't care, I'm coming home." So that's how we brought her into the business. She started working at one of our stores on the floor and eventually worked her way into being a buyer. And Drew was in Chicago getting his MBA, working at a company called Computer Science Corporation as a consultant. And he worked for them about 5 years, I think. And I would ask him frequently if he ever was interested in coming into the business, and his answer was usually no, that he didn't want to come in and run my, quote, my business. And our board convinced us to ask him to really do a proposal to him. And we did, and my proposal was, Drew, I have 10 years before I plan on retiring. That's a minimum of how long you're going to need. So I'm asking if you want to consider coming into the business, and I'll rotate you around the company. You'd run a store for a couple of years, and then we start giving you different areas of responsibility as it made sense. And you have 30 days to decide, because I'm not going to ask you again. Well, fortunately, his wife was on board, and he wanted to start a family, so he moved to St. Louis and started working for us. His first permanent position was as a store manager at Mid Rivers. He was there for 2 years. So we had to actually recruit him.
So Tom, thank you for sharing your story, and it's very, very well done, and we appreciate it a lot. If you could do it over again, would you?
Oh, yeah. See, I would never welcome, oh yeah, I want another painful experience. Yeah, I want that. Yes. It's been a very meaningful and growing, growthful time in my life, yes. I would absolutely do it again. I'm so glad I didn't become I'm glad I left the seminary.
Tom,
Mike, what? Oh, Peggy says so is she.
Tom, you talked a lot about your relationship with Steve. How about your relationship with David? Are you 50-50 owners and weekends only? And how's that relationship gone over the years?
We're not 50-50. I'm the majority owner. I bought Stephen and Matt's shares when they sold them. And David sold some of his shares 3 years ago and retired. He's still part owner. But my relationship with David has always been excellent. David has always been very respectful and supportive, and frequently, and we don't do this enough in our family businesses, you guys, thanking me for the contribution, for running the business. I just think it's important that presidents who are running the business and all the responsibility, they get thanked by their families for creating wealth for them. But our relationship was always strong. It was always very enjoyable.
Tom, would you recommend to others to go into business with family members? And if yes, what's the one thing you tell them to do to prepare?
I'm sitting here thinking about my friends at ARCO who made a conscious decision not to have family in their business, and there is a certain freedom around that, and when you're going through difficult times, that looks very attractive, not to be in a family business. But I would recommend a family business, as long as the senior generation is committed to properly educating the next generation on what it means to be in a family business. That there's ongoing discussion and conversation, and I really put the burden on the senior generation to do so.
So Tom, your parents or your father selected you to be president. Was that a competitive endeavor? On what basis did they choose you? Is this primogeniture, the oldest son gets to be
No,
the next
actually,
leader?
no, I was the one who had more of a problem when Dad appointed Steve president of Lazy Boy. That was the first real big position in the company. And I thought, gosh, I wonder why he didn't choose me. And I thought, I comforted myself by saying, well, I guess he's saving me for when he retires. And that worked for me. So it was I think it was at that dining room, it was at the kitchen table conversation at my house when he said, said to my brothers, I'm appointing Tom to be president. I could have the timing wrong, but he did it in a family meeting. He told us all at the same time. He didn't even ask me. He didn't even ask me if I wanted the job. He just said, I'm appointing Tom president. I went, oh. So it's like that. That's how that happened. And there was, everybody went, okay, yeah, good, that's good. Stephen was still president at Lazy Boy, so that would have been the only other option at the moment, at the time.
Was there a moment that you realized that Weekends Only was going to work?
Was going to work? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. It was a year after we had opened, and lines at the cash register were becoming longer and longer because we couldn't keep up with the transactions. And so that's when I realized, oh, this thing has legs.
So Tom, a lot of retail stores are finding it particularly challenging to operate today. And you mentioned your e-commerce. What impact is the internet having on your business, and how do you see that internet affecting your business moving forward? More opportunity, more threat, some of both?
Oh, it's taking market share. It's a threat. And I liken it to, like, Walmart in the old days was the force that made you innovate, to compete. Now it's the internet that's forcing us to innovate and learn how to differentiate from what the pure play e-commerce can provide to present enough value to the customer that they'll still come in our stores. Fortunately, we have a product that customers like to touch and feel and sit on and lay down in, but there are still threats with internet like Amazon, pure play internet right now, but is toying with the idea of opening furniture stores. So there's always threats. And we always have to be looking, how do we, right now we're trying to get to, our strategy is to get to multi-channel as fast as we can with our e-com platform and brick and mortar and all the other ways to communicate. Social media is to try to be more sophisticated and innovate in that area. And right now we're building a new platform for our e-commerce site to help us accommodate that and mobile sales, which is more and more important every day. So it is a threat. There's always threats.
You talked a lot about the value of your board. What were you looking for? What characteristics were you looking for when you chose them?
Well, this is the second attempt at a board. The first attempt at a board was a failed attempt because I asked my accountant, my attorney, my banker, my human resources consultant, Joe Hoffman, and I think that was about it. Financial advisor. And the problem with that is that we were paying these people for services outside in the course of doing business, and they didn't want to make me mad and get themselves fired by challenging me too much, so I never got challenged. So we disbanded that board, and then I started looking for CEOs or former CEOs who had been where we were going and who who had multi-store formats and multi-regional experience, because that's where we were going.
So you have expanded beyond the St. Louis area to Indianapolis.
Yes.
What prompted you to move beyond the St. Louis area? And then how did you select Indianapolis of all the potential other places you might have expanded to?
Well, our stores in St. Louis are maturing. It's 20 years now. They're maturing, and so we have to diversify. If we want to continue to grow, we have to diversify and start looking at other opportunities to get market share. And the fastest way to gain market share is in a city where you don't have any presence. And so we started to look in cities where there are close to at least 1 million in population, but more importantly, how many households. We look for close to 1 million households. It's awesome, or best if it's a state capital, because there's a stable working community there. It's best if there's a lot of higher education in the country or in the city, because there's a lot of transient people going in and out who need product. And Indianapolis was a growing market, and most importantly, it was only 4 hours away, which we could get to and back in a day logistically, which is key for product distributors like ourselves. So we have, that's basically the criteria. It's got to be a large enough market to do more than one store, and it's got to be able to, we have to be able to get there, although we have a logistical partner that is helping us with that. The rules aren't so rigid anymore. Dino's here, Dino Logistics. And, but it's number of households. Household median income needs to be at least national average or above. That's the other one.
What factors went into choosing your successor, and do you think that's a different set of factors in a family business?
I don't think it's different. So the successor has to be seen by the rest of the organization as credible, first of all, by his or her experience demonstrated in the company. They have to desire it. They have to have the passion to lead and to manage. So passion for the business is extremely important. Strong business acumen is important. But I'd say above all of that, they have to be really good with people. They have to be able to form relationships with people and keep seeing the good in them and bring out the best in them, and lead from that strength, as well as they have to be a good cultural fit. We've had more failures at Weekends Only for cultural not fits than we have talent not fits. So yes, you got to have talent, and then second, they got to be a good cultural fit.
So let's follow up on that. You are open on the weekends only. You have to have employees there on the weekends. That's when most of us look forward to being off. How do you find the staff to work the weekends only?
Well, there's advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages are there's a lot of people who are looking for second jobs, especially during the times that were really tough there in the mid 2000s. But still, people, when they need extra income, it's a great part-time job, because you can basically work 10 to 20 hours on the weekend and make some decent money. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage is, because of the nature of the temporary need for a second job, we have higher turnover. And so we are constantly advertising through our website portal. We have career opportunities all the time on those. And so we get most of our applicants through the web, through our website. But we have a lot of, like teachers work for, we have a lot of teachers that work for us because they look for summer job as well as weekend business. But a lot of people in between jobs will work for us. So about maybe 20% of our workforce, I don't want to say workforce, our sales force is full-time, the rest are part-time. I could be a little light on that, maybe 30% full-time. We do have some full-time salespeople, but most of them are part-time. But it's always you got to be continually hiring.
And most of your managers work Monday through Friday, or do they work the weekends also?
They work the weekends, yes, sure.
Okay.
Any restraints at family gatherings about talking business? Any ground rules?
Yes. We try, with Sarah and Drew, when we get together, Peggy's very knowledgeable about what's going on in the business, and so she can join right in, but we don't want to exclude Rachel, so she gets bored pretty fast if we start talking about business together, so we try not to talk too much about it as a group there. And my brothers and I don't talk about it very much anymore because they're not in the business anymore, so that's the only restraint I can see right now, is that we try to be sensitive to Rachel.
So somebody says they are a member of G3 and they are having trouble talking about their succession plan. What's your best advice about succession planning?
Yeah.
And let me broaden that a little bit and also say, after you answer that, what's your best advice about getting any difficult issue on the table so it can be addressed constructively?
Well, my number one on the succession, I think it's critical that I have non-family members who are vetting out the successor. I rely on Lane and Diane and my board to really, and Jane, who's Sarah's boss, to be the key feedback providers on success, on their readiness, on family readiness, and we got to have some objectivity. I think the biggest mistake would be is if I were the decision maker on this, because how can a dad make that decision? I mean, in fact, I might even be too rough on him, so it's just not even a good idea. Did that answer your question, though? Yeah.
So now let me broaden it a little.
Yeah.
What's the best way to get any difficult issue on the table so the family can address that issue in a constructive fashion?
Why don't you ask Lane to come up and answer that? Lane, how would you answer that? What's the best way to get it on the table? Here, take your microphone.
I don't know.
Best way to get on the table.
Well, it starts with a relationship. So I think a non-family member that you trust, or I think, Tom, you use an advisory board. But again, I think there has to be, I think if it's a larger family, I would think it'd have to be somebody that you can all trust, that will be objective and will provide feedback to you that would be, that would not take into account, your position in the family, that would really, that you could, so I think somebody that's going to be honest, that you have some trust with and a relationship with, so that when they give you advice, and probably some ground rules that we're going to have to listen. We're going to listen to what this individual says. I think that's something that you related to with Diane and Jane and myself. I think that's what we bring to you, is objectivity and honesty. And because we have a good relationship, you're willing to listen to our counsel and take it on and respond accordingly. So we don't have this, fighting, well, I hear what you said and I don't care, we're going to do it anyway. We don't have that. So I think that's the really important part. And I think you just have to find that within your business.
So thanks, Lane. So one of the important environmental factors at Weekends Only is I have always insisted on a high feedback environment. And so like recently, Drew asked for a 360, which he just got delivered to him a couple of weeks ago. So that's another way to get feedback on the table, critical issues on the table that are difficult, because he's going to get those from around him.
Lane, while we've got you up here, do Tom's kids, Drew and Sarah, report to you?
No. Drew has reported to me. He just recently moved over to Dion, so I have had that relationship, both reporting and I guess non-reporting.
But they don't report to Tom.
They do not report to Tom.
And how is that?
I think they think it's awesome. Probably. Am I right, Drew? Sarah? Yeah, they like that a lot. I think, certainly Tom goes to lunch with them periodically to just kind of check in and see where they're at. More of a mentoring and a father thing. And I think, but as far as day-to-day, they're getting their feedback and coaching from non-family members in the business.
Thank you.
So Tom, can you give us a sense of your organizational chart? Let's do this while you were CEO or president, before Lane assumed his current role. Mm-hmm. And then I assume that Lane reports to you, and that's your only direct report now. So go back to when you were the president and CEO. Who reported to you at that point?
It was the senior leadership team, CFO, COO, VP of merchandising, VP of, at that time it was a director of HR, and I think that's it. Am I missing anything? Let me see. That's it. Yeah.
So 4 people.
Yeah, 4 people.
Okay.
Did you ever consider having non-family members be owners along the way?
When I would, back then, no. Now, yeah. Now, yes.
For their counsel and objectivity, or just a way to raise equity?
More of a way of retaining right now. And depending on our need for cash, we may need to also sell some for equity.
But you're saying, when you said retaining, so you see senior management
Yes.
as potentially owning shares
Right.
being a good idea?
I'm coming to see that that's a good possibility.
So let's consider this the last question. Somebody wants to know the name of your charity at WashU. Apparently they must have won
It's
a
a-
charitable gift card
Yeah,
this
it's a
morning.
Catholic Student Center. The Catholic Student Center at Washington University.
Okay, Catholic Student Center at Washington University. So let's have another round of applause for Tom. I feel like you had a real family business moment this morning. You heard something very much from the heart and over many years, and I hope you found value. There are a lot of sponsors in this room, have a lot of expertise in dealing with family businesses. There are a lot of other family business owners and members here. Network with them, talk with them, learn something else before you leave this room. If you are going to the CMA Family Business Forum, we will meet here at the foyer at 9:45 to go to the room and spend more time with Tom. So we'll meet over here in the foyer, and then we get escorted to a different room here in the Ritz. So be there at 9:45. Thank you for being here. We're adjourned until next year. Thank you.